new woman of today, where we are going to discuss. Here is a story where it came that almost 1 million women are not going to get back to the job after being working from home. That is going to happen. What is going to happen to women? Because they are going to have their livelihood impacted. It will seriously impact, especially Indian women also contribute significantly to the earnings. So a lot of issues. We have got some outstanding speaker lined up to come and speak to you. And please don't miss a couple of these events. I only said about a few. If you want to know more, log on to our website. And once again, very warm welcome. I'll give a minute more to the people who are in the queue to log into the thing. Also, we'll be logging in social through media. Now, coming to today's topic, I met when Mr. Ram Iyer last time when he came for one of the MMA events. I was so impressed with the clarity of thought he expressed on the subject which we discussed then. Then I came to know he's written a book leading through the pandemic, Unconditional Wisdom from Heartfelt Leaders. Very, very important because this is the world director. This is where he shared the wisdom of many of the leaders, what should be their unconventional wisdom. And we also have this evening, along with Ram. Ram, we all know, is a worldwide director of digital strategy and e-commerce consumer channel marketing, Microsoft India. And he'll be in conversation with Ms Kayleigh. And Ms Kayleigh is, again, a very, very impressive profile, which I'll introduce you a short while from now. And before we'll formally launch the program, let me have the privilege of introducing Ram and the distinguished speaker of this evening, and also Kayleigh. For the audience, you must know, Ram has over 2 decades of diverse experience in digital, and Ram has been recognized as the 50 most talented retail professionals by the CMO Council of Asia. He's also received a Retail of the Year award by the Economic Times for executing retail excellence and Vodafone and many more. An avid reader, business books, and also loves bikes, passion. Yogi mediates daily, Ram, and he's also keen squash player. I think the pandemic time has clearly proved yoga and pranayam and meditation really helps you. And he also loves dancing, ballroom, all the good happiness thing in life he likes. Very warm welcome to you, Ram. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Let me have the privilege of introducing Kayleigh. Kayleigh she helps corporate leaders, entrepreneurs express their authentic selves through multi-author books, solo books, and ghostwriting. Because many of the big business corporate leaders have so much of knowledge and wisdom, but I think people like Kayleigh come forward and really express the thing. I think it will be a great learning value for each one of us. She works with leaders who want to expand their impact on influence. Kayleigh also holds Kayleigh on a coffee show podcast. She shares her ideas related to the personal growth and future of society. Prior to founding the company, she also spent nearly a decade in research, and she also received her BA from Duke University and an MBA from full scholarship from University of San Francisco. And Kayleigh is informally committed. She will be talking to members of MS sometime later, whenever the date and time convenient for you. Very warm welcome to you, Kayleigh. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, let me have the pleasure of the theme for this evening. As you said, the discussion on the theme of the book. We launch the book officially, and the book is available online. And thereafter, I will request Kayleigh to talk on the theme of the book and what made her to bring out this book, and some of the interesting stories, anecdotes, which she'll know, which we are not prelude to that. She'll be sharing that. Thereafter, Ram will talk. And let have the privilege of officially he launched the book, ladies and gentlemen. And big round of applause for the lovely book, and which you all must read, Leading Through the Pandemic, Unconventional Wisdom from Heartfelt Leaders. And Soul of Excellence Publishing is the one. And thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure to launch that book. And do read this book. It's available on online. And Kayleigh will also brief you during her brief introduction and brief talk on the book, that where is it available, how can you get a copy of this book through various modes. Now I request Kayleigh to please share your insights on the book, and afterwards we'll request Ram to talk on the theme of the book. Over to you, Kayleigh.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Captain and Ram and everyone for joining us here today for, I would say relaunch and e-launch of this really incredible book. And I'll share more about the theme, of course, in just a second, but I want us just to all take a moment to take ourselves back to a year ago. March of 2020, where were you? What were you doing? Were you driving to work, dropping kids off at school? Were you running from one thing to the next? Like, our lives looked so different a year ago than what they do right now. And so just think for a minute of the the journey that you've been on, because if you're here on this call, you are a leader in your own right. And I want you to just take a moment to reflect and appreciate that you're still here, you're still growing, you're still adapting. And the lessons that you've learned over this past year about who you are as a leader, how you show up, what makes you tick, and what you really care about, and where you want to put your energy in, these are important lessons that I feel like many of us can say, if not for this past year, we would have just been running from one thing to the next. And we've experienced loss, and we've experienced grief, and we've really been challenged this year. But if you're here as a leader and you've shown up and you want to learn more about the book Leading Through the Pandemic, it means that you're aware that there's a bigger purpose for you as a leader. So with that as setting the stage, as the captain shared, I'm Kayleigh O'Keefe. I'm the founder of Soul Excellence Publishing. And you might be surprised to learn that this is a brand new venture that I actually founded last year in the midst of the pandemic, because I felt that after 12 years working for Fortune 500 companies as a consultant, and then as a early stage technology startup leader in San Francisco, that what I actually loved most about every single role was learning, growth, facilitating, and bringing a group of people together to achieve something greater than themselves. Like, that's what I loved most. But what I also noticed is that working for me, at least within the confines of a company, didn't allow me to express myself to the fullest. So this time last year, where was I? March of last year, I was flying across the country from San Francisco to Miami, Florida, to set up shop and launch this new venture. And I did it because I wanted to take a bet on myself, and as a leader to really challenge myself to say, I never thought I was an entrepreneur, but what if? What if I have the vision, I have the passion, I have the idea? So that's what brought me to Soul Excellence Publishing. And that word, that phrase, soul excellence, is all about reconnecting with our inner wisdom, the soul part, and then going out and achieving big things in the world. Because again, if you're here, you're not someone who's going to be a hermit just reading your whole life. Like, you have an impact on people. And so how do you connect and align, and how do you go out and express? And so come August of last year, I was thinking about what was going on in the world, and I knew one thing. I knew that the real leaders among us are the ones that are quick to adapt. They see what's going on, they feel what's going on, and they sense, wait a second, I cannot resist. I actually need to adapt, grow, and change. And when I thought about that, I said, I wonder what leaders are doing around the world right now to adapt to this pandemic for their teams, for themselves, for their families. How are they adapting? And then I thought about, what am I good at? It's bringing people together and connecting with executives, and realizing that executives and entrepreneurs are so busy, they don't really have the time, especially during a pandemic, to pontificate, to share a full book, to take on a whole new project. And so the vision for Leading Through the Pandemic was born. And I said, let me bring together 25 executives from around the world, from across industries. And what if each of them wrote a chapter about what it's been like for them up until this point in the pandemic? Because, we can still say that we're in it, right? It's evolving, it's changing, but we're still in it. And so with that vision, and, through connecting and just putting the invitation out there of, would you like to write? Would you like to express? Would you like to go deep? That's, of course, how I met Ram. And in the book, you'll meet 25 executives who have shared the ups, the downs, the turmoils, what it was like to lead a global team, what it was like to lead a factory, like to lead a 400-person manufacturing plant. Like, there are so many stories within the book, but the themes, and as we'll explore in Ram's chapter, so much have to do with a deeper understanding of self and what makes us tick, and how do we respond, and what can we take away? Because, we can all experience things, but without a bit of reflection, and we would suggest that soul excellence with some writing getting clear on what you think and what you believe and how you want to show up as a leader, that's really the power of writing. And so before, Ram, we toss it over to your chapter and the lessons learned, I'll just share that the vision for this, I think what was really special about this book, just imagine like 25 people, different countries, Australia, US, all different time zones. Each of these leaders wrote a 3,000 word chapter, roughly October, November timeframe. And we turned around and launched this book to the world in January, hitting Amazon bestseller status in Australia, I think hot new release in India, 5 different categories on Amazon in the US, in business, in leadership, in strategic management. And what it really says to me is that when you're a leader, when you shine your light brightly, it doesn't take away from anyone else, even other successful leaders. In fact, when you bring a group together and they're all shining their light, what you have is a spotlight. Mm-hmm. And what this book really is a spotlight on what it means to be a leader in the 21st century. And I would suggest that it's not just the financial success, the results, and while I believe those are incredibly important, we get to play the game of business, which is all about relationships and innovation. And to do that is where we need to learn about ourselves. So that's just to set the stage and to take you on the journey of, where this group has been and what led me to meeting Ram and him writing his story in the book. So I think I'll pause and Ram, I just remember when we first met and you shared with me, yes. I have some insights and they apply to my business, but I didn't learn them in business or at Microsoft. Like what I experienced was baking bread and what that meant to you and what you noticed and observed. So I'll set the stage and just say like your chapter. So for those of you just getting familiar with this book, it's an anthology. There are 25 different stories, 25 different perspectives. And in Ram's, he goes deep into business lessons, leadership lessons we can learn from the simple act, not easy act of baking bread.
Yeah. Thank you, Kayleigh. And this is really a great setup and context. And before I kind of start, I'm very grateful to Group Captain Vijay Kumar for giving us, both me and Kayleigh, the opportunity to, bring this wonderful compilation of stories, and these are human stories. These are heartfelt stories to all of you here. And I'm also grateful for your time, for tuning in and listening to us, because this is something which I think is very special for all of us. And I think we can all learn a lot. So with that, I'd like to kind of just walk you through some of the lessons that I learned and share a few thoughts. And so let me just pop my screen up and share a few thoughts, and then we'll get back to Kayleigh, because I think what we really enjoy doing with Kayleigh is to have a conversation and a heartfelt dialogue. So let's do that. So starting first of all, a little bit about Kayleigh. You already heard about her. For me, I think I would just say that as much as Captain Vijay spoke about me being part of Microsoft and everything, I think one of my core tenets is my personal philosophy. And that's where I think there's a meeting of minds and hearts with Kayleigh as well. We both are eternal optimists. We are learners. We constantly want to kind of push ourselves to go from blue oceans of, go to blue oceans of unknown, from harbors which are safe of known. And we are in the constant desire to learn more and achieve more. So when Kayleigh and I got connected on LinkedIn and we found that moment of connection, I think there was a natural point where I felt that I was meeting someone who really resonated. And really the idea of learning from 25 other leaders was truly spectacular. I must say that is what's important is not so much about my chapter. I think what I gained out of learning from all the leaders was even more special and more important. So Kayleigh has already set the scene with the vision of the book. We are very grateful to all the readers who have helped us achieve the bestseller status, which is, thanks to all the, great reviews that we got and the feedback that we received. But I want to kind of set the stage and start by, this quote which I opened my chapter, and this is by one of our favorite authors worldwide, and also Arundhati Roy, who's from India, who talks about this concept of the pandemic is a portal. And it's a beautiful metaphor. In my mind, the portal is a gateway for all of us from one world to another. And all of us really do have a choice. As Kayleigh said, if we go back into time and look at where we were last March and see where we are today, there's so much that's happened in the past 1 year, and we have a choice, to carry all that baggage, or we can travel light. We can take all the learnings. One thing is for sure, and I was talking to Group Captain Vijay and asking him, how are events happening in MMA? And Group Captain Vijay Kumar was explaining to me so eloquently that the world has moved to a hybrid model of events. And that's interesting, right? For us, we all should acknowledge that things will change. This pandemic has been here for such a long time that behaviors will change, and it's expected those behaviors will change. So it's an opportunity for us to reimagine and to reinvent the way we do things. And MMA has been, I would say, right at the front of driving that innovation, and which is what gets me excited as well. When I have to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning in Seattle and have this conversation here, what gives me the joy is the fact that the innovation that the Madras Management Association has been doing to really drive that kind of reimagination, which really makes a difference. So each one of us really have that opportunity to reimagine as we kind of chart our future. Now, coming to this topic of baking, and I really want to kind of get into this. Why would a digital strategy leader, start baking of all the things in the world? Because it's the least expected thing to do. But if you really go to the genesis of, again, the same period of time that Kayleigh took us to, I think one of the gifts of the pandemic was the gift of time. I think we got a lot of time. I got a lot of time because I couldn't meet friends. In many ways, it was a kind of a paradox. You have time, but you want to do something. And it was at that point in time that one of the simple joys of my life has always been eating freshly baked bread. Since my days in India, before I moved to the US, it's always been one of those simple things we used to do. And it's a ritual which we continued here in the US with my family. So, missing that smell of freshly baked bread was something which did create a void of many ways. And I had to tap into my passion to learn a new skill. In many ways, it was getting out of my comfort zone because baking bread is not something which I've ever done in the past. But I said, let me learn this new skill of doing something new and exploring a new dimension within me. And I started this process of baking bread. But what was more interesting out of that entire experience of pushing myself, of learning something new, was a lived experience in many ways of learning something very, very different. I would say that's where I really started, kind of noticing the parallels between what happens in leadership and what happens with just this act of baking bread. And in my chapter, I talk about these 9 lessons that I learned as an outcome of this entire process. Because as much as it's been a lived experience, as Kayleigh rightly called out, it was also a moment for me during this lived experience to reflect, to learn, and to also understand and decode, what's happening behind the scenes when each of these moments were happening during that period of learning or getting uncomfortable, I would say, with learning something completely new outside my comfort zone in many ways. So the first learning, which was there, and I'm not going to go through all, but I'll tease a few of these thoughts. And obviously, when you learn something new, the first thing that you hit upon is failure. It takes only 3 seconds for to realize after 3 hours of baking that your bread sunk. And at that point in time, you have a choice that you can sink in your hearts and say, "Oh my God, this is not what I expected." Or you kind of go back, reflect, and learn and say, "Oh, okay, it failed. Let me try and understand what did I do wrong this time, and how can I make sure that it works better." And what's even more interesting is that when you actually post pictures of bread fails, you get more love from your fans as much as you get from a beautifully baked bread. Actually, this gets more love in many ways than the one which you post with. So it also shows that sometimes being vulnerable, being open to kind of say that you failed, it's liberating. And I have seen that also with my team, that when I have gone and I have actually shared a moment where I don't know, and I've asked for help, I always found that the team is far more open and willing to kind of open doors for me and say, "Okay, we are here to lean and help you and support you in terms of making that happen for you." And this notion of it's okay to fail, or it's okay to be not okay as well, is a very, very important notion. And we all need to make sure that we give grace to ourselves. I think this is a point in time where we can't be hard on ourselves. We need to give grace to ourselves and our teams as leaders, and important for us to also give them the psychological safety in many ways. As Frederick Nietzsche, says that doesn't kill us, makes us stronger. You really have to make sure that the teams feel empowered, that they can do those experiments, take those risks, try a few new things. And I'm not saying here that we should get completely bold and rash. It's all about taking those smart moonshots, which are really going to make a difference in terms of reimagining and driving that innovation. And this is so critical, not just during the pandemic, but as we come out of the pandemic, to empower our teams to really kind of have this notion that it's okay to fail, reflect on your failure, learn from the failure, don't repeat the same mistake, but make sure that you're pushing yourself to boundaries where you've never been before. So that's the one of the key reflections that came through. The second thing about baking bread, and you'll realize that it's a process, it's a science. There's a recipe, you have to follow the recipe, and after many bread fails, you will suddenly realize the importance of following that process. It's so critical that you follow the process, because process, if you really follow, and if you really follow that consistently, the outcome is oftentimes a beautifully baked bread with the best crust you can have and the best flavor and texture that you can ever imagine. And you can produce that with consistency. And this really brings us to this entire concept of excellence. And one of the important things for all of us to acknowledge is that we are living in a very competitive world today, and we live in a world which is driven by outcomes, and so we are hyper competitive in many ways. And there is a subtle difference when you really look at it in terms of delivering, and I would say delivering with soul excellence, if we have to put it and pick up, from Kayleigh's concept of soul excellence. There's that subtle difference, and that subtle difference, in my view, is the values. And so when oftentimes I have made a statement to my team saying that, hey, I don't care how you get it done, just get it done. I think we have to rethink ourselves when we really make such kind of statements, because it's important for us in today's day and age to deliver with values. And that's going to be critical for you to deliver that sustainable performance over a period of time. So that was another important reflection. This is one of my best lessons, I would say, among all the lessons, which is do your best and leave it alone. So in the process of bread baking, you would typically set it up and then do all the steps, follow the process, and then just leave it there for about 3 hours for the bread to really rise. And this is true for teams. As a leader, I have come a long way, I would say, from a leader who used to micromanage to a leader who now empowers. And I have seen the difference in terms of performance of teams in both scenarios. And oftentimes, especially when we had the pandemic, when we had to move from a world where you could actually see your team members, you could actually walk into the cubicles of your team members or the cabins, to a scenario where you were remote. There is a feeling and there is a need for you to micromanage, and from that to let go of that feeling and to say that your teams will rise and they will perform as long as you can give them the 2 C's. In my mind, it's giving them the clarity at the start of the process, just like you need to have clarity in terms of the recipe of the bread and make sure that you have the complete picture in your mind, how you want to go about executing it. But you need to give clarity to teams, and then you need to have the confidence in them to actually deliver in terms of outcomes. So both clarity and confidence become very critical. You can't just say, I'm confident that you're going to make it happen. You as a leader have a responsibility to your teams, and that responsibility is about giving clarity to teams. And there are times and moments in time where they'll come back to you to seek clarity, and being there for the teams at those moments and giving them clarity is super important, because that's where the teams will rise as well. So that's a key learning for me. Moving on, I think one of the key learnings for me as a part of the baking process has also been the need for organizing. The baking is a time-consuming process, but if you organize yourself in terms of the prep before the baking process, that really helps you and sets you up for success. You can actually make sure that in the pantry, everything's organized. So you come and see in my pantry, everything right from the flour to all the measuring spoons to everything, I've kind of structured, organized it. I can easily find it. And so I save time there in terms of getting things done. But more important, I think the big piece here is not just about agility is a buzzword these days, and people confuse agility for speed. In my mind, if you really look at it, agility is both speed, but more important, it's stability. It's important that you are focusing not just in terms of getting speed, but you're also creating stability within your teams. And just taking back to a real life example, during the pandemic, many organizations would have gone through a reorg. We also had to kind of look at how do we reconfigure our organization in the best possible way to deliver to the best interest of our consumers. So I actually had to take members from my team and put them as digital leads into the business. If you had to reimagine the business, they had to be in the business and understand exactly what's going on within the lines of business across various parts of Microsoft, for them to really understand what's being closest to the customers and the partners where they can make a difference. And that means letting go of members of my team and then creating a dotted relationship with them as opposed to having a direct relationship. And I must confess, initially it was a bit unnerving for you to reduce the size of your team and let go and have your team members go and get present and operate in other teams. But then I focused on the why, and I really looked at, why are we doing this instead of focusing on the what? And that really helped me to recenter myself, assure myself that this is really the right thing to do, to bring stability, to really bring that speed and stability together by having them really close to consumers. So in my mind, I think, we all need to kind of, borrow this paradigm of agility being a combination of both speed and stability in many ways. Finally, I think the one learning which is there, and this is more a gift, I would say, which I got from Michael Gervais, who's a famous sports psychologist here. He works with one of our football teams here in Seattle. And, this entire concept of mindsets are antidotes to despair is really a very powerful thing. And the primer here, which, including today, I followed is the concept of 111, which is every day when you wake up, the first thing you do is not go and pick up your phone and check your Instagram account or check your email or what's going on. You actually center yourself, and for 12 seconds, you take a deep breath. You give yourself a big smile, say, be happy that you're alive and kicking, and be grateful as a next step to someone whom you owe, a thanks. For today, it could be to Group Captain Vijay Kumar for giving the opportunity to both me and Kayleigh to be here and share our stories with us. It could be, to anyone. It could be even for somebody in your team who has really done an excellent job. And finally, one intention. And today's intention for me when I woke up at 3:30 a.m. was to really make sure that we really have this great heartfelt conversation and really make sure that we have a fabulous dialogue here with all of you and really offer you value. So, this 111 is a very powerful technique in my view. It's a primer. It primes you. It sets you up for the day. And it's something which I feel gives you an opportunity to make, as Dr. Michael Gervais would say, every day is an opportunity to create a masterpiece. So you can actually create your own masterpiece every day by really following this primer. So those were some of my initial thoughts, and I think this is the perfect segue for us, Kayleigh, to get back to what you do best, which is ask some great questions and segue into a great heartfelt dialogue.
Yeah, let's do that, and also look to Group Captain in terms of how you typically facilitate with the broader group. And do want to make sure that I leave the group. I want to allow the group to see themselves in Ram's story and then in some of the other stories that are shared in the book. So I'll be sure to do that. But to kick things off, Ram, just your experience, as a super busy leader, you have your family. What was the benefit to you as a leader of actually putting pen to paper, keys to keyboard, and taking the time to reflect on this past year in this particular book?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, Kayleigh. I think, and Group Captain actually, Vijay Kumar also alluded to it at the start of the session. I think one of the things which leaders don't do enough is that we don't write. And for me, writing a book or chapter in a book is not just writing a chapter in a book. It's hitting pause. As leaders, we are constantly running, and especially with the pandemic, I think we were in a state of chaos. You are operating with so many unknowns in many ways. You don't know which country is opening, which country is closing down, what's happening with consumers in different parts of the world. So hitting pause, learning and reflecting is something which is very, very important for leaders. It's a muscle that you really need to build. And the reason it's important to do that is because as much as you need to do it to learn yourself, you also owe a responsibility to your teams, because you got to make meaning and you have to make sure that you are truly modeling, coaching, and caring for your teams at a very high standard. And if you are constantly running, then you don't center yourself to set yourself as a leader to really deliver that principles of what I would say of model, coach, and care, which are so integral to being a great leader. So for me, this was in many ways, like the many gifts I received, a great gift which came by my way to pause, write, reflect, and really look at it from that perspective. So I'm really grateful to you for offering me the opportunity to write and forcing me to write also, because it's not an easy thing to write.
You really hit on something when you talk about hitting pause and what does your energy look like as a leader. A lot of us may have the conception from a kind of another place where to be a leader means to be directive, to have the answers. And, we can act however we want to act because we are the leader. And I think what we're all realizing is, especially when we're not leading necessarily in person, our energy, our enthusiasm, our communication, the way that we show up is so much more important than it used to be, especially when we're operating remotely, where these subtle kind of things about who we are and how we operate can get missed. And you remind me of in the book, Deepak Jose, also born in India, now working for Mars in New York City area, head of digital analytics there. And in his chapter, he talks a lot about social and emotional contagion. And it just reminded me of what you were saying, where how we show up as a leader, it does set the tone. Like our energy does influence the group. And I know a lot of us have shied away from that too, of like, we have to step into that space and say, again, shining our light and bringing that energy does not detract from anyone. But if we don't do it, it actually does not give permission to people to show up and shine brightly. It kind of sets the tone of like, ooh, okay, like Ram's kind of pulling back, so-and-so's pulling back, so maybe I pull back. And it's that social and emotional contagion that we really do have an influence on as a leader. And you bring it up, and Deepak's chapter bring it up of, wait, how are we showing up? And what is our energy like? More than just how are we managing our time? How are we managing our energy and addressing our own emotional issues and the things that come up in the course of a day to still show up and be who we are naturally?
No, that's a great point, Kayleigh. I think I always look at it from a leadership perspective, and we have the leadership principles, which is all about creating clarity. First of all, I think we spoke about clarity, and the importance of creating clarity is very, very important for leaders to really set the teams in the right direction. But in order to inspire them, it's also important to generate energy. I think if you don't generate energy and you don't synergize that with creating clarity, then you don't deliver success. So, this entire concept of clarity, generating energy, and delivering success is very integral to leadership.
If you look back on this past year and being a leader within Microsoft, like what was truly the most difficult moment for you personally?
Yeah, I think the one moment which I would say which was really difficult has been like, especially during holiday, which is a big sales moment for us. It was one of the unprecedented holidays that we had. It was a digital everything holiday this year because all sales across the world went online, and it was, in many ways, you had to kind of pivot to something like 75% of sales going online from erstwhile 28% of the sales which were online, which is it's the 3x kind of growth. And when you have that kind of growth, as opposed to assisted selling, which would be happening in stores, where consumers would get support from, staff which is there in stores, and you have to really pivot everything online. And we had some fabulous launches as well this year. We had an Xbox launch of a new console, which was a really important one for us. It really called for us to rethink and reimagine everything that we did. So we had to infuse digital in everything that we did. And for me, that involved reimagining things and doing things very, very differently. And that, for me, that moment, till the 5 days of what we call as the Cyber 5, from the Thanksgiving holiday to the Cyber Monday, were the most important days. And we had to really kind of test, learn, explore, have the growth mindset to try new things, explore new ways of doing things. And that was really, I would say, one of the most challenging business moments that I had during the year.
Mm. And yet the way that you're sharing it is it was challenging, but also it comes across as extremely rewarding in the way that you're describing it, of like, it was really hard, but we did pivot, we did reinvent, we did show up, and we did say, okay, here's reality. We're not going to shy away from it. How do we work with it? And I think this like work with things versus resist is a huge theme shared by the other leaders in the book of like, okay, I expected one thing at the beginning of this year, I thought one thing was going to happen. It didn't. Okay, let me work with this and still make something special out of what's being presented to me.
Yeah, and I think this is where I think we had to work with all partners around the world, not just with teams. So obviously, you work with a global team, you work with members around the world, but you also work with retail partners, and this is where the partners start. They expect Microsoft to show up as digital advisors, helping them to reimagine their business and relook at their business differently. They put a lot of trust on you, and it's important you reciprocate that trust as a trusted advisor and help them transform the way they are doing things. At points in time, you always want to even challenge them because you want to kind of say, hey, you got to do what's right for the consumer. If the consumer is buying online and picking up stuff in store, you need to kind of relook at your sales motions to do what's right for the end customer. So there were a lot of moments where we actually had to reinvent our entire playbook of how we go to market, experiment with new ways of doing things which we would have never done before, change our entire advertising to make it far more emotive and empathetic to consumers so that consumers can relate to it. So there were several firsts, I would say, in the last holiday. There were many firsts, just like consumers were experiencing many firsts. We had many firsts as well. But it's again, it goes back to the same principle that you have to experiment. It's okay to fail. It's important to try new things, but it's important to learn and make sure that you're in this constant of circle of learning, which becomes so critical for all of us.
Is there one thing, like as you've learned so much and grown so much over the last year, as you look ahead to the rest of this year, is there anything that you're like, okay, that thing that I stopped doing last year, I'm no longer going to do, or like anything that you're like, okay, this was transformative. I want to make sure that I continue to do this as a leader for my team.
Yeah, I think among all the things I would say is being vulnerable is one thing which I learned during the pandemic, and being open to show that you're vulnerable and you can make mistakes too as a leader is something which I have found very liberating. And I have found that even in my recent dialogues with team members saying that, hey, look, looks like I made a mistake and this is perhaps not the best way to handle the situation. Do you think I could have done better? And just creating that space to one, receive feedback from team members, but also in my mind, having the humility to have that conversation really opens doors and builds a new level of trust. And I think that's something which I have seen as very powerful, and it's something which I think I should definitely continue as we go forward. At least for me personally, that's one learning that I want to kind of make sure that model vulnerability. It's okay to ask for help. You don't need to be the know-all. You have to truly be the learn-all, and be willing to open arms to learn from each other, rather than kind of have this know-all attitude that, oh, I'm the smartest person and I need to know everything that's going around everywhere.
I love that learn it all versus know it all. And for those that are watching that are like, yes, okay, this speaks to me. I want to be more vulnerable as a leader. I see the benefit, but I still feel afraid, or it's like I want to, but I'm still holding back. What's the easiest or simplest first step for someone who's in that position as a leader? Because it can feel like you're doing a 180 sometimes on your team. If you're behaving one way, you see the light, you want to try something differently. A lot of us have resistance to that because it feels inconsistent, but yet it's just the evolution of who we are as a person and as a leader. So what's something that someone can do to start to model that in a way that maybe doesn't feel so scary?
Yeah, I think I would say start at home. Start it with your near and dear ones. It's the fastest way you can do it. And sometimes it takes courage to do it. Like with Kavita, my wife, I have to, sometimes I have to be vulnerable with her and be open with her, saying that, yes, I made a mistake. So that's the safest space for you to try to start it. Then start small, I would say. It's not easy. So start more in your one-on-ones before you kind of start opening up to larger meetings. So when you have your one-on-one conversations with your team members, that's a great safe space for you to kind of open up, create safety for them, create safety for yourself, give grace to yourself as well in the process of doing it. And then kind of start doing it in a larger space, because this does require muscle and courage. So I would not, I'll not kid myself by saying that, okay, I just started projecting failure or much more open about talking about these things straight off. No, it's a measured process, and it has to be done in a way that you actually build credibility, because you don't want this to be seen also as performative, right? You want this to be genuine and authentic. And that's where, in my mind, it's important to do it with the right intent and make sure that the team see it also with that perspective.
The intention, the small action that generates a result, that builds the confidence, that creates more momentum. Like, no matter where we're at in our leadership journey, when we're going to do something new, taking that first small action, feeling like the impact that it had, and then choosing to do it again or go bigger, it's something that we often forget as leaders, because we have big visions, we have big goals, and to still see some of the incremental steps to get there and be okay with the time that it takes can be challenging for those of us who are impatient and are like, all right, let me just go do this thing. But we have to feel aligned and really work with how we're growing as a leader. So good. Before I want to open it up to the group for questions, if that's something that you typically do at MMA. And you've heard Ram's story, and I just want, for those of you that are like, okay, what else is in this book? What else can I learn from it? I want to say, if you're in we call the sandwich generation, and you had to take care of elderly parents this year and school-age children, you're going to want to read Michelle Clark's chapter, as she went through that and experienced that. If you're a mom with young kids that wants to start your own business, you're going to want to read Suzanne's chapter. If you lead a global team like Ram and you have, employees all over the world, obviously read Ram's chapter, but you're also going to appreciate both Chandra and Ashish's chapters as they talk about leading their team. So if that's you, go there. And maybe you're working more in a manufacturing environment. Jen Anglin, operations leader at Georgia Pacific, company here in the US and globally too, that makes paper products, all kinds of things. Like, being a leader in that environment and trying to keep employees safe and still work with corporate that was asking a lot of questions, you're going to want to read her story. And then if you're someone who just wants to learn, how do I reflect? How do I write more? Andrea McDowell's chapter, Make Note, she goes deep into her process for reflection. And maybe you're someone who was furloughed or laid off, or just you didn't get that promotion this year because the money wasn't available, whatever it is, then you're really going to want to read Amy Pittman's chapter, as she expresses not just the impact of being furloughed and then laid off, but the deeper trauma that it revealed to her, and how she was able to heal that this past year to move forward in even a bigger way in 2021. So if you see yourself in any of those situations or stories, you're going to want to read the leadership lessons in this book. And you'll note, even from Ram sharing right here, this is not, these are the 10 new management lessons that you must follow to be successful. No, this is all about you as the individual, as the leader, and how to maintain who you are and also evolve to rise to the occasion that we all face. So it's really, as you can sense, that type of book, and not, these are your, in-source or outsource questions. No, this is about you as a leader. So with that, I'll kind of open it up and turn it over to you, group captain, of how you like to involve the audience.
Thank you, Kayleigh. Thank you, Ram. Interesting insights. And one thing I took it, know all, learn all. I think it's a very, very important thing for each one of us to really understand that. And what we keep telling is lifelong learning. If you keep learning all through, that's what we follow in MMA. All of you on Zoom, I got a lot of questions through YouTube and the Facebook, which I'll put it across to you. Those who are in the Zoom, please put your questions in the chat box. I think I will pass it on to the distinguished speakers. It can be addressed to Kelly as well as Ram. Both are really happy to take on your questions. And yeah, here is the first question to you, Kelly. And this has come from one of the YouTube viewers, Shanmugam from from Coimbatore. What do you want to know, Kelly? You have seen leaders around the world during the pandemic. Can you share a specific anecdote or story or a country which adapted itself very brilliantly to the changing environment of pandemic, or any specific leader whom you would like to pinpoint, one single individual who adapted and with the agility and who did exceedingly well, and that insight will be a great inspiring thing for many of the viewers watching this program.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the stories that really exemplifies, having a broad perspective, but also adapting to the local environment is the story of Jennifer Anglin, who is the leader of this manufacturing plant here in Arkansas in the United States. And what's really, I think, incredible about her leadership is that, they were living in Arkansas where the pandemic really didn't, it's in the middle of the country here in the US. The pandemic was sort of the last to hit there. And I think what she did so well was being able to say, okay, our employees, like our production is ramping up. Our employees, some want to work, some are afraid of the virus. How do we adapt to what's going on and be clear on the decisions that we're making? And it's the clarity of the decisions and communication around them, which I feel like if we look broadly at, global leaders and politicians, there truly was a lack of clarity, a misinformation, saying don't wear masks, do wear masks. Like there was just so much back and forth across the globe. And I think leaders that were able to say, okay, I see what's going on globally, but what do my people need here locally, and not get swept up in any global narrative of how we need to handle something, but say, what is the situation here? What does the virus look like here? What are the constraints that we're under? What do my people need? Going local, I think this year served leaders really, really, really well, since everywhere, yes, we were all dealing with the pandemic, but quite honestly, it looked very, very different depending where you were located, the industry that you were in. So that's what I would say is like not getting swept up of like, oh, let me take the most draconian measures because that's what feels right at the global level. No, I have to go local and make a decision from there.
Well, Ram, here's a question addressed to you. You mentioned your thing and manage your energy. I think you do much better. There's a saying, manage your energy, the time becomes infinite. Do you think it's really worked with you, or maybe in your organization? Because you really get bogged down, as you mentioned, you're really focused so much because of the 76% of the sale came from online, and it's quite tough. So how did you manage during this difficult time, your energy to create more time for yourself?
No, it's a really great question, I would say, first of all. So, your energy, if you really look at it, what creates energy is a mindset. And you have to really, first of all, tune in. And I said the primer is the first way to kind of tune in, to get intentional and create the right mindset. I think once you have the right mindset, then it's important that you sustain that mindset through the day. By being more optimistic. I think the most important thing which we all get impacted is when you have setbacks, you don't want to kind of get impacted by setbacks. You want to kind of learn from setbacks and have an optimistic attitude to things even when they go wrong, and say, okay, it went wrong, but let me try to find a way of making it better. And then savoring also quick wins, because I think the important thing here, which we don't realize, is that we wait for winning the cup. But scoring a boundary is as important before you win the match. So you have to not, wait for the big moment when you hit the ball, the last ball for a six, but you also have to enjoy all the home runs that you score or the fours that you hit during the course of the match. So make sure that the teams are constantly in this phase where you are celebrating and enjoying. A small, simple practice, which I do every Monday in my huddle meetings, is start with what I call as the amazing story of the week. I kind of make sure that every team member shares his or her amazing story of the week, which, it could be a simple thing like, someone said they saw tulip shoots starting to come out of the garden, which is it's springtime here in the US. We've had, a winter and we had snow and all that, but now you start suddenly seeing life coming out from the ground. It's a small little moment of joy, but that positive moment of joy spurs the people to think in a more positive light in the discussion rather than think of all the negatives that could be there. So I think leaders have a responsibility of generating energy, and it's a question of bringing mindset, having that sense of bounded optimism, and making sure that we're channeling the energy of the team. And to what Kayleigh also said, the social contagion, I think is a very, very powerful concept. We can actually create a positive effect on the teams. We can equally create a negative effect on the team. So, as leaders, you have the power to do both. So you have to be very, very conscious of how you can actually channelize that energy in the right direction.
Super. Kelly, would like to add? Because you will also come across so many leaders who really manage their time so beautifully through the energy management.
Yeah. So two things I'll share is, this concept became really clear to me when I read the book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And that's where you really start to realize that we do create our time. So I would highly recommend people read that book. But the only thing that I would add to what Ram said is that we waste so much time in our minds when we distract and self-doubt and procrastinate and think negative thoughts about ourselves. Like, it depletes our energy. And I would argue that many of us are not even aware of just how much of that chatter is stripping us away from using our time effectively, using our energy to the fullest. And so just be aware of that talk in your mind that's telling you like, oh, I made a mistake. Like, it's that dwelling energy. And when you dwell, you're like, you stop and it's not good. So for someone like me who likes to make meaning out of things, that's what we do for a living here at Soul Excellence, is help leaders tell your story. You also have to know when to not make meaning of things, when what that person said to you doesn't mean a thing, and you don't have to take it personally, because it's in those moments that we can let ourselves get distracted and bogged down and take away from the little time that we do have on this earth to make a difference.
Excellent. In fact, one of the leaders, when he shared recently, he did mention about this. In between the session, he used to have a cooler session with all the staff and keep thinking, which is a very cool thing, which everybody accepted. That really changed the atmosphere. Very interesting. Here is a question from YouTube, which has come from Magalingam. What he wants to know is, do the times make the leader, or does the leader shape the time? How can a leader infuse people's lives with the sense of purpose and meaning?
Yeah, I'll start. So I do think the conventional wisdom out there is there's actually two schools of like, leaders are born, and then it's no, leaders aren't born, leaders are made. And I think I would argue there's definitely a combination that happens. And there's moments like this past year where you do just get to see how people act under stress. And I think as a leader, what does it mean to help people discover purpose? Well, what I used to think when I was leading teams was that it was about me giving the team a purpose, about me saying like, this is why this matters so much, while we need to launch in this state next year, while we need to push the product, like, this is why it matters. And of course, that's what mattered to me. It didn't really matter to anyone else. And so as a leader, you have to create the space to allow people to say, why does it matter to me personally? Why do I care? Why am I showing up? What good things happen in my life if I invest my time and energy there? It has to be an individual decision, not like what I used to do, which was like, look, and then we're going to make this amount of money, and then you'll probably get a percentage and your equity will be great. It's like, maybe those people didn't care about equity. Maybe they just cared about being appreciated, So as a leader, you really have to create the space for each person to come to that decision. And then as a leader, you have to know it, because that's in how you can motivate and understand your team and their different motivations in a way that if you're just operating from here's what matters to me, you're going to miss out in allowing the team to move forward together.
Like to add something?
Yeah, this is a great question from Halingam. I love that question. Actually, a metaphor which you could use for explaining this is you take a jar and you can put in that rocks, and then you can fill the jar with sand all over it, right? And so the question is, in my mind, what are your big rocks that you should really focus on? Because as a leader, you can be in a constant whirlwind and you can be spending time on the sand rather than fixing the big rocks that really matter. And we all fall into this trap of the whirlwind. It's a powerful trap that we all like to kind of get sucked into, and you want to kind of hold yourself being sucked into the whirlwind and focus on wildly important goals, which are the rocks, and make sure that you are really focusing on the rocks and not getting trapped in the sand. So I would really urge everyone to, one of the exercises which I do is a simple exercise. On Friday, I did it with my team, is the big rock exercise. I tell them, hey, what are the three big things that you want to kind of accomplish for yourself in this quarter? And I ask them, what do you want to be famous for? Don't tell me, or you want to make your mom proud. And you can go and tell your mom that, yeah, I did this because I delivered this important thing for the company. And so sometimes it's important for leaders also to phrase things in a way that helps them inspire teams find purpose and meaning, and get that kind of energy as well through the course of doing that. So love that question, and it forced me to think as well. So appreciate that.
Thank you. It's great. I think we have over 1,050 viewers watching this program live now, and the questions are coming from various social media portals. But Zoom, the people are very, very focused. They're not asking any questions. If you have any questions, please do type your questions. The panelists will be more than happy to address your concern. Ram, this is a question addressed to you from Mr. Daniel from Delhi. What he
Yeah.
wants to know is, you mentioned your business increased by about over 76% online during the pandemic. And
Yes.
you want to know, there's so much of your store people must have invested huge money uh, in advance to store your products and sell them and give them after sales service. How did you take care of the store owners who would have lost their livelihood to a great extent because online, and how did you manage to detain them for your future?
Yeah, so it's a really important question. I think the reality of the world that we live in today is that we've moved ahead, especially on all things digital, 10 years ahead, because the kind of acceleration that we have seen with e-commerce and everything has been short of saying that it's been an exponential kind of a growth that we have seen. So our responsibility is to help our partners transform. As I said, we are trusted advisors. So we can let them kind of say that, oh, we don't want to transform and we want to continue to be in a brick and mortar way of working, or we can help them evolve by embracing the new ways of selling, and making sure that we are offering them technology, we are offering them advice of how they could even modernize or digitize their operations to sell in a digital way. It's just like, Group Captain, you kind of reinvented your entire events model to move to online model, and you successfully have created something, and now you're moving to a hybrid model. I think that's the question. That's the reimagination that we will have to do with all partners. And it's important that we explain to the partners that that's the new normal that we all need to kind of tune into.
Well, I think what you said is correct. We have over 8,000 members, but this hybrid model online, I think we had almost about 2.5 lakh viewers in the last 1 year of our programs. So that shows the interest, the reach of digital is fantastic, actually. I don't think we are going to go back to total offline. It will be online, offline hybrid model only. Yeah, here is a question again from Chennai, Mr. Ram Venkataraman. What he wants to know is, there is an increasing amount of productivity pressure for many people who are working from home at the moment to learn new skills, start new projects, etc., especially through messages shared on social media, which can lead
Mhm.
to further stress and anxiety. What can your people facing this pressure do to manage the stress? Because there's a lot of pressure on the people when they work from home. The management always thought he's got a lot of time at his disposal, and expecting the people to learn a lot of new technique, new skills. Is it true in your case, Mr. Ram Iyer, in your organization?
Yeah, so it's I would say it's one of the things which post Satya coming into Microsoft, at least from our perspective, one of the big shifts that we have made is the cultural shift, right? And we have embraced this meme, which is called as the growth mindset. The growth mindset is a great book by Carol Dweck, who's a professor, and it's an amazing concept. So I would urge all of us to go and look up and read about Carol Dweck's book. And the entire concept there is that it's more the ability for humans to learn. And I think it's important that we all kind of move away from this fixed mindset that I can't learn anything new. For me, it was baking bread. It could be anything, like I'm learning Python now because I believe like for me to really handle all kinds of data and have that acumen, I don't need to know Python, but I'm learning Python because I'm curious. I want to kind of make sure that I can build that muscle in me. So I would encourage that, you need to find out what you need to learn, what's going to be important for you from your future, which is going to help you to perform better in a particular task or role, and choose your own form of learning. To the question in terms of social media and the pressures that come from social media, I think that's a very, very important, it's a very important phenomenon that's happening around the world. And I think this is where I think you have to kind of go and search your soul and see what's important for you. For me, social media is a means to express my thoughts. It's a means for me to understand what the world is looking at. But it's never a point of, putting pressure on myself. Sometimes, as Kayleigh said, you can react to situations and you choose how you want to react. And that's totally your choice. You make a decision whether you want to react in a particular way or not. In this case, personally, the way I kind of use social media is to my advantage. I try to make sure that I'm not getting distracted by social media. I use it to my advantage rather than to my disadvantage. But Kayleigh, if you have a perspective, I'd love to get your thoughts as well on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the question sort of brings up new skills. And I think one of the biggest skills that we're being called to really understand and practice is setting our personal boundaries and having our personal standards, and what does work for us, what does not work for us, what do we allow in, what do we not allow in, and being very conscious of what those boundaries are. I think to me, it's one of the most important skills, because it's so easily, even if I'm like, I'm not going to go on social media today, for some reason, I still know, quote unquote, the news that's going on in the world. Like it's getting me somewhere, and so we really have to be conscious of our boundaries and what we allow in and what we allow out. And the last thing around productivity, I do think that because most people did have to work from home at some point this year, it did allow leadership to experience what that was like in a new way that they hadn't really before. And so I do think you'll hear in the book, like there is a lot more empathy for people's responsibilities and seeing, their family life and understanding that, okay, things are a little bit different. And so I think before, when people were working from home, it was such a rare thing that leadership was more skeptical, and they're like, wait, are they working? Are they on Slack? Are they in this meeting? Who's there? And now there's a little bit more awareness of this, life and work being integrated in a way that it had been a lot more separate last year.
Great. Ram, would you like to answer Mr. Sridhar's question? What is that coming in the chat box?
Absolutely. So Kayleigh, Sridhar's asked a question, which is, do you think the lockdown has opened innumerable possibilities, or do we miss the excitement of people meeting physically and the real enthusiasm and energy? So it's a great question, Sridhar, and I really like the opening question. There are two parts. Let's take the first one in terms of innumerable possibilities. My answer is yes. The lockdown did open innumerable possibilities. For example, this conversation would have never happened in the pre-lockdown stage. I don't think I would have ever met group captain and had this conversation from Seattle all the way there in India, because I would have just said, okay, 3 a.m. in the morning is a nice place for me to go and sleep and, and extend my sleep for some more time till 5 till I get on my Peloton and do my ride. But this conversation would have never happened. But just getting a little more real in terms of what are some of the other possibilities that have happened, especially with events, with what the excitement and energy. Microsoft's a global company. We kind of run events across the world, and we bring members from different parts of the world together. There's an event happening even today, starting at 8 o'clock. It's called Ignite, which is one of our most premier events, which we do. One of the shifts which we saw with events itself is that our participation in events went up significantly because we became accessible to many people who couldn't travel all the way to the US to attend events. I think so. In that way, what this world has suddenly become is connected everyone almost seamlessly overnight. And I must also say personally as well, I used to definitely speak to my mom and have a call with her once a week. But these days we actually have like a Zoom call with or a Teams call with all my family members coming together, and we are celebrating occasions even more closely, almost like in real life. Now, I will be very dishonest to myself by saying that we do miss that we have the same excitement and the energy that generates from meeting people IRL in real life. No, I think we all get energy out of meeting people in real life. This Friday, when I did an exercise with my team, I asked them, if there's a genie in a bottle, and if there's one message you have to give to the genie and tell her to fulfill that, what would it be? Many of them said meet each other in real life, because I think that's important, because I think we get energy by seeing each other and being close to each other. So I think you got to take the benefits of both the physical and the digital world. And we have to really live in this world, which is a phygital world, where you can actually bring the two pieces together and get the value of both in many ways. So that's really how the new normal will be as we go forward into the future. Kayleigh, your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I mean, I'll speak for myself of like, yes, I want in-person meetings. Yes, I want to hug people and say hi. So here's my thought is like, I do feel like we need a lot more in-person human interaction ASAP, because I do feel like this last year, as people have spent more time online, people are sort of becoming their, I heard someone say, and it resonated with me, becoming their online avatars in the real world. And what I mean by that is being less civil, is being less concerned about other people. And so I am actually very afraid as I look to the future and think about the damage that has been done this past year to our social interactions because of wearing a mask, because of looking at the other person like, oh, do they have something that I don't want? And I do think we have a responsibility as leaders to really show the way of what it means to be in the real world and treat people with respect, and to not, one of the things I see from school districts in the United States and politicians and big corporations is this very, very risk averse, like we're just not going to do anything. We're not going to encourage people to get together and just wait and wait and wait. And I think there is some real damage that can be done to the human psyche if we continue to wait, especially knowing what we know now about the disease, about how it's spread, about the vaccine. Like there's a lot to be hopeful for, but it actually is going to take each of us stepping up and saying, like, we want to meet in person, because I think without people stepping up and saying that, there's a lot to lose for these bigger organizations, and they're going to be a lot more risk averse. So I definitely desire for us to be in the real world, because I think it brings us back to our humanity. And of course, having experiences like this is super, super fun. But yeah, next time I want to be in India for this conversation, so
Yes.
I want to move back to that for sure.
Yeah, we'll have it soon. I think it'll happen. Here's a question from Mr. Sate from Mumbai. He said empathy is a word which most of the leaders use during the pandemic. And when one work from home, is what I feel is that actually the organization intruding to my privacy at home. Actually, the most of my things got disturbed in a home. Both husband, wife working, the children have to be taken care. They may not have sufficient room to do that. So that's the time they said really empathy. In that connection, what he wants to know is what is the employee level empathy, and what can your company do to achieve it? And how well does your company display empathy in the workplace? What are some of your favorite strategies to showcase it, and how successful you are in this implementation?
Yeah, I can go first and share some real examples from Microsoft, and maybe then talk a bit about some of the things that I do personally as well. So yeah, I think empathy has to be real. Number one, it cannot be something which we say, but we don't lead by example. So one of the policies which Microsoft introduced was this entire for 12 weeks, if you had a pandemic and you had a child care, a lot of schools in the US went remote, and parents had to kind of be with their children, because remote schooling, imagine like a 5-year-old kid who's sit down on a screen and learn, it's not going to be easy. So they really needed help. So we were one of the first companies to really announce that 12-week policy, where you could actually take that leave for childcare, or it could even be for a medical emergency for someone who's got impacted in the pandemic. So that was really one of the true demonstrations of from the company perspective. The other thing which Mr. Sathe raises is a brilliant question. I think we all live in this syndrome of you get up from the bed, get to the desk, get on the call, and then go back to bed. So it's a desk to bed to desk kind of a syndrome that we live in. And the commute, which was a very important part of breaking the mind, listening to Ilayaraja music tune or a song in the journey, we lost all those moments, right, which were there, which were giving you that sense of pause and break, which was there. So one of the things which at least we've done, again, is we've introduced what we call as well-being days. These are days where there are no meetings that are there on those days. Those days are for your well-being. You can choose to do either you go to a hike, or you do something which you want to do, or you want to just listen to music or read a book, or just spend time with your loved ones. So the 5 days we have introduced recently as well-being days for our members. One of the things which I have created in my team is what I call as no meeting Fridays. So on Fridays, I don't organize any meetings for my team. I try to make those Fridays a days for you to do your things, the things which are important for you. So those are some of the steps that you can take. But most important, I think it's really important to tune in and understand the needs of your team members. Your different team members are at different stages of needs. Like some of my team members are living alone here. Their parents are in Taiwan. Some of my members have 2 kids. And so they're juggling with their schedules, and both of them are working parents, so they have to kind of manage lunch hours to be there with their children. So giving people flexibility and making sure that you're giving them that time and space to do the work, and having that trust and belief in them that they will actually do it. If you give them the flexibility, becomes really important. But Kayleigh, your thoughts on this one, because I think it's a really poignant question.
Well, maybe I'll add the kind of the slightly opposite perspective that really came up from, I think, reading Paul's chapter in leading through the pandemic. Not opposite perspective, but one other thing to add to it, which is as a leader, being really careful over this past year of not to over empathize to the point of not holding people accountable or to a certain set of standards. So I saw a lot of leadership talk over this past year that was about empathy. But as I really read it, I'm like, is this empathy, or is this just saying like, all right, this year's kind of a wash. So, it's hard, just do whatever. And like, that's so against just my personal philosophy of how we need to show up as leaders. And so striking this fine balance of having empathy, understanding employees at an individual level, because I think we also saw a lot of just making assumptions about employees at a group level. And so when Ram's talking about, okay, my employee, they have 2 kids, this one's living alone and feels lonely, this one's overwhelmed, like that's really having empathy at an individual level and saying, okay, how do we work with that to still achieve what we desire as a group? So I would just say not letting it be kind of over empathy or being used as an excuse to not actually grow through this and show up.
Great insights. Ram, your idea of no meetings on Friday is brilliant, because people can really plan for the long weekend, actually, so that it gets set. Brilliant.
Yeah. I think people have been to be honest, Captain. There are studies as well to show that the productivity of people actually has been quite high in the pandemic. People have been working far more, and you want to make sure that teams are not getting burnt out. So you want to make sure that you are keeping a good, but I agree with Kayleigh that you have to have a balance between empathy and accountability. The fundamental principle is that you trust and you give empathy, but you need to have the reciprocal accountability coming from the members as well. So that's a great point, actually.
Okay. So you got another 2-3 minutes. I'll try and squeeze in two last questions. That one is come from again Mr. Rajagopal from Chennai. Why is it that some people seem to weather any business storm or crisis without appearing to break into sweat? How is it that they always seem able to recover from the stumble and move on even greater success? What's your view on this?
Ooh. I think my perspective would be it is a lifelong learning process, and I would say the people that are really good at it are the people who have not shied away from challenges and crises. They are the ones that have run toward a situation even when they felt terrified. So it is a combination of courage and saying yes, and saying, I don't need to be perfect, I don't need to know all the answers, but I simply need courage and I think some faith that, like, by virtue of showing up and leaning into or stepping into the crisis, like, you're going to be of service and you're also going to get something in return. So I don't know, it might be a little genetics, but I think we do all have like that little piece of courage inside of us. And, are we willing to put ourselves out there and take the risk?
Super.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's,
Mr.
it's,
Ram, please go
it's
ahead.
a great point. It's a great point, which Kayleigh graces of having belief in yourself. I think that's very fundamental. But I would say there are two qualities which you have to build as leaders. One is grit, and the other is resilience, right? And I think resilience is going to be very, very critical for people who come out of the pandemic. If there's one attribute I would say, even for companies and organizations, that you have to really build, is the ability to be resilient, to take shocks, but not get bogged down by the shocks, but bounce back from the shocks. And this is going to be true for countries as well, as we kind of get on a path of a recovery, to be truly resilient. So, I've been always influenced by Angela Duckworth's work, on grit. I'm a big fan of her work. I would request the gentleman to please go and look at Angela Duckworth's video. It's a very inspiring piece which talks about grit and how it's important it is. And I would really, urge to kind of look in that direction for some inspiration.
One last question, Ram. Would you like to take on to Mr. Anand's question? Is there on the chat box? One final question.
So great question from Anand. First of all, applaud the vulnerability here. When one can't get good at timing and couldn't do more productive things than the other, could he be able to shine on every occasion, is the question. So I think, I must say, first of all, timing is important. I'm not saying that timing is not important, but I would always kind of challenge ourselves, saying that you create your time as well in many moments. So like, as Dr. Michael Gervais says, every day is an opportunity for you to create your masterpiece. So you have to have the belief and the self-confidence and the faith to be at it, to go at it, what you really want to do, and make sure that you're trying again and again. Because, if you look at all the inventors or anybody who's done something spectacular and phenomenal, it's never been the first time that someone did it was a huge success. And there's history always teaches you lessons, and you can look at, starting from Bill Gates to Steve Jobs, or any of the leading leaders in the space, all of them, or even McDonald's. They all went through a series of failures before they hit success. So, having that belief and the confidence is really, really critical. But Kayleigh, any final comments on that great question which came in the chat box?
Yeah, I think, the way that I've created more time for myself is by having better boundaries and saying no. So not saying yes to everything, really saying my time is valuable and believing that. And so how I choose to spend it is reflected in that way. So having boundaries, saying no, and that's uncomfortable. So it's definitely something you have to practice too, as we grow as leaders, is having those boundaries and saying just because we can do something, since we're really talented, doesn't mean that we have to do that thing. Yeah. So create your boundaries to focus on what you do best.
Brilliant. Kelly, I think as you mentioned, timing is very important. I think we have come to the end of the session now. Now, before we move forward, may I request Ram and Kelly, your final closing thoughts for the evening before we'll come to the end of the session. Over to you, Kelly, your final thoughts on that. One takeaway for all the viewers who are watching this program, one leadership takeaway, which you think a must for everyone.
Yeah, so I'll say thank you to you all for joining. And of course, as a publisher and someone who is very interested in writing, I would say you grow as a leader every time that you put pen to paper and you take a moment to write what you're observing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. So write what your experience has been this past year, and recognize that a lot of the answers to your questions lie within you. So use writing as a tool to access them.
Ram, Kelly, anytime, whenever you publish a great author, we are there in India to really.
Yes.
It's an offer to you. Yes, Mr. Ram.
Yeah, no, first of all, just gratitude, heartfelt gratitude to you, Group Captain Vijay Kumar and Kayleigh as well for joining on this fascinating dialogue. There's been so much insightful moments, great questions, great energy in the discussions as well. But if I were to kind of bring it all together, I think the most important thing is to really have a growth mindset. I would say in the 21st century, what would really distinguish leaders who are going to lead and the ones who will really thrive are the leaders who would have that growth mindset, that ability to be learn all vis-a-vis being a know-all. Is what's going to really make a difference. So my invitation is to really embrace the growth mindset and have this learn all attitude, which is going to make all the difference in the future.
Thank you, Ram. Great insight, thought-provoking and very inspiring thoughts, both Ram, Kelly. I know 2020 is behind us and we are looking forward to 2021 is a new year. I think we all look forward to that. And thanks so much for joining us. I know 4:50 in the morning, please, you can go back and have a cup of coffee and relax. And as a token of our appreciation, you are in USA, this is what we can do it on your behalf. What we do is we present on your behalf 200 face masks to all the people who are in need, because till the vaccine reaches everyone, we want to still protect every one of them. My team goes around to different places where identify the needy people, educate them, and make them wear the mask. And this way, we're able to control to some extent in some pockets of our area, which is near to our office. And thanks so much, Kelly, and thanks so much, Ram. It's indeed a pleasure, privilege to host this evening. And I think the learning of this evening from your thoughts have been fantastic. I'm quite sure it will turn a lot of people who listen to this program to be a great leader. That's what we really wanted to do that. And thanks so much. Stay safe, stay healthy. Kelly, we are looking forward to your visit to India soon. Ram, whenever you're going to visit your family, we are here to really look forward to receiving you. Thanks so much, and bye-bye till we meet again. Good night and namaste.